Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Halsey. I'm the CEO of Akira Software, and welcome to CDO Magazine's Tech Talks. Today, we're thrilled to have with us JoAnn Stonier, who's the Chief Data Officer for Mastercard. And we'll be doing 3 segments of conversations today. So in our first segment, JoAnn, love to welcome you to the show and ask you to tell us a little bit about your background and how you wound up being Chief Data Officer at Mastercard.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I really thrilled to be part of the program. So my journey to Chief Data Officer, as I've talked to other colleagues, is a little bit of an interesting one. It is certainly not the most common journey. For many years, I was the organization's Chief Privacy Officer as we took on trying to figure out how we could use data in ways that were compliant with all of the emerging privacy and data protection laws around the world. But it became increasingly apparent as we were first concentrating on personal and sensitive data that we needed to also expand the mandate to other types of data in adjacent spaces, such as location data and other data that needed to be governed. So over time, my job began to expand from being just focused on personal and sensitive data to all of the data that needed to be governed at Mastercard. Well, once we started that journey, what was happening is more and more data was really being regulated around the world. And laws like the GDPR, the Global Data Protection Regulation in Europe, were beginning to be vetted and created, and early drafts were being actually published. So that we began looking at that as an opportunity to say, okay, how should we be getting ready for the next generation of data use? So what happened was, as we were doing that, my team was always embedded into how we were designing our products and solutions that use data. And so we used a process that we called privacy by design, where we actually began to look at data, its use, and began to actually work with all of our product development teams, our data scientists, our business folks, as well as our technology teams, to begin to really build more of a robust privacy and information function. But GDPR and other laws really began to make us think that as we built platforms and operational requirements that were going to be needed by the law, that we were going to need actually a business owner for data. And I can't tell you how many conversations I had with our chief technology officer, the general counsel, the CFO, and said, who's going to be this business owner of data? And they kept saying to me, just keep designing the solutions, until ultimately in December of 2017, they asked me if I would want the role as the first chief data officer for Mastercard. So a little bit of an unusual story, but I think the work that we kept doing actually led us to the work that needed to be done.
It's actually quite unusual, JoAnn, because a lot of organizations begin the collection of data primarily for analytic purposes, and then of course they realize they have to make sure they're compliant with regulatory. You guys came about it from the other direction. Did that create any unusual circumstances for you, or when did you realize, was there a turning point when you realized that data was going to become a powerful asset for driving the business and not just something that had to be secured and regulated?
I think we were already there when I first came on board as the privacy officer. I think we were beginning to realize that we needed to advise our banks, predominantly our merchant customers, on kind of data insights, because as a network, right, that globally connects consumers, our banks, and merchants, we were beginning to help our customers with their data insights. So we already were beginning to employ a vast number of analysts that were actually assisting our customers with data insights. But over time, we recognized if we wanted to do more, if we wanted to provide economic insights, if we wanted to go broader, we needed to understand what were the requirements from a legal perspective, which was really the privacy piece. We already were a very rich company from the standpoint of providing information security, right? That's really what our network is grounded on, right? Being able to provide security and then fraud analytics. So we already were doing a fair amount of data analytics, but just in very specific ways. I think what has happened over time, much like other companies, we came to a digital journey of realizing we've had a lot of data, we have a lot of data expertise. We now really, it's almost an obligation to begin to really work with all of our different customers to provide different types of data insights. So it actually was a very parallel journey. We just did it in a very compliant way because the law was evolving, our business was evolving, and we needed to really work together to make sure that we were actually thinking about both innovation and risk in the same way, compliance and innovation at the same time.
So at Akira, we provide software that helps provide secure data access, and we see a lot of customers implementing us to apply the security and privacy right management after the fact, whereas you did that as you went along. Is there anything that you learned in that process that you think would be valuable advice you could share with other CDOs?
Absolutely. I think what we did when we called it privacy by design, that's a term that's now very widely used. Regulators use that term. We certainly were at the table when regulators started using that term. And now we call it data by design, right? Because it's even broader than personal data. But actually, if you start your product design or solution design sessions, right, with the individual in mind, right, that data is almost always going to either be about an individual or applied to an individual, right? At the end of the day, a product or a solution is going to wind up one way or another. Then you might as well design it with that in mind. And if you do that, it makes it much easier to do that with your product people, with your marketing people, right? With whatever teams of analysts are going to actually be creating it, to understand what's in bounds, what's out of bounds, right? How is an individual going to understand how their information, even if it's combined with lots of other individuals, right? You're going to do a lot of aggregation or indexing of information, right? And you're going to be looking at how a particular city's economy is performing over time, or how different industries are responding to COVID, for example, right? Even then, you need to be able to say, can I explain to an individual how their information is being used, right? Because ultimately, personal data, we believe, is owned by the individual, right? But how did we use it, right? And what are the benefits of the product solutions that we're creating, both for them as individuals, but also for society at large, right? So those are some of the ways that we actually do it in our design sessions. We do it early in the process, so it's actually part of the process rather than tacked on at the end. So privacy and security are actually kind of the baseline of what we design everything that we do.
I think that's such a compelling approach and saves a ton of time in retrofitting and re-engineering the data. In our next segment, I'd like to dig into then how did you evolve into other products? But just looking at your career, I have to ask as we wrap up this first segment, it looks like part of your career has been about data and data privacy, but a whole other aspect is around interior design. And you might have a consulting business on the side where you do some interior design work. And I just had to ask you about that.
Well, yes, I do. So I came to interior design late. It was a passion of mine when I was young. I wanted to go to art school. My parents actually were adamant that I pursue an academic career, but later in life, after actually the events of 9/11, I decided it was an unfulfilled dream. So I went back to design school actually after going to law school. So that's a whole other story to talk about, requesting law transcripts to go to a design school. But actually, I think my design skills actually come really into play a lot in my current job, because I think part and parcel of being a good data officer is understanding how to design with data. And so some of the very same process that you use when you're a designer of an interior space is you have to understand what the constraints are, right? So if I'm being asked to design somebody's kitchen, I need to understand how much space is there, right? Where is the plumbing going to be located? Where are the gas lines going to be located? What kind of or is it going to be an electric stove, for example, right? How much space do they literally have, right? How large of an oven? Are they a big cook or a chef? Do they want an eat-in space or do they want a counter space? All of those things are design constraints but they allow you to be creative once you know the constraints. I think the same way about things like privacy requirements or security requirements, or if it's on soil requirements, or even a technology platform that you're currently using and needing to transfer to something else. All of those things are just part and parcel of what you need to design with. Rather than consider them all stumbling blocks or obstacles, just incorporate them into your thinking and incorporate it into your product design process. Once you start thinking that way, you get everybody kind of excited about what they're trying to achieve together, rather than moaning and groaning about everything. And it also seems to me that when you get everybody excited, then you get much more innovation out of things, right? Some of my best design work, both in data and interior design, have been the most challenging circumstances. So I think that's how they complement each other.
That brings new creative perspective to this concept of data by design and privacy by design. So let's wrap up the segment with that thought. And in our next segment, we'll dig into some of the creative design projects you guys have built with data. Thanks,
Looking
JoAnn.
forward to it. Thanks.